fifth module is the ethics of self-care. So just using the Oxford Dictionaries online, ethics is the branch of knowledge concerned with moral principles, as well as the moral principles governing or influencing conduct. So Carol Gilroy and Mura did a great research on looking at self-care, and their thing that they're really focusing on is establishing a professional ethos in the therapy, counselling domain to prevent fatigue, and that establishing a professional ethos in which self-care is viewed as a moral imperative is something that they were the first ones to actually strongly put on the table. And, you know, what I'm hoping to kind of impress on you is important in us actually thinking more consciously about our self-care and what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, with whom we're doing it. And their work also was stressing the importance of self-care, that self-care action plans be comprehensive in nature and include attention to the physical, cognitive, emotional, recreational and spiritual dimensions of our being. And they're suggesting including these in the professional codes of ethics, and in professional education, not just the actual codes of ethics, but the morality and the ethical necessity of self-care, because it really isn't stressed enough in our education. Looking at research that heightens our consciousness about self-care, they was recommending were also important. So the integral ethical practice includes a conscious intention of carers to sustain health and well-being, because relating back to the first module we looked at of the body, the self is the only aspect that we have that we can bring to our work, and if that's not consciously, we're not consciously intending to look after that, it's going to suffer. It's like our cars, we give them regular service, we fill them up with petrol, you know, we make sure it's got oil and water. We don't do that for ourselves, you know.
And there's a moral imperative with making sure you've got decent tyres and a well-functioning radiator, because otherwise you're putting other people at risk, right?
Yeah, all of that stuff, yeah. Ourselves and others, yeah. And communities, yeah. So challenge of ethical decision making always is really taking into account that the developmental model of the carer is always a better determinant of behaviour than the developmental levels of those who created any of the ethical codes. We can have the best intentions, create wonderful codes of ethics, but we will interpret those according to our own moral and ethical development. And not only the interpretation, but what I was talking about before is we can espouse these things, but do we enact these things? Recently there's been 3 cases that have come to mind of psychotherapists who have been, found out to be sexually abusing clients. They have been, this is all in the sexual realm, not the financial realm, although that happens, and also in the power realm. So the other one was actually supposedly a sex addict counsellor who is rampantly being exposed now as being a sex addict, and who has been acting out for years.
Spiritual teachers as well, of course.
And spiritual teachers, yeah, it's classic. I mean, Ramana Maharshi was saying, no, it was Ramakrishna, his work, sex and money are 2 of the things that bring spiritual people undone, 2 major things. So, in terms of Corey, in their book they talk about that there are levels of ethical functioning, lower levels versus higher levels of ethical functioning. So they talk about mandatory ethics that we can follow, which is, we follow the minimal standards, because of the musts and the shoulds, like they'll find us out if we don't, or I'll get caught, and so we do it from that imperative, internal imperative. And if you take into account Kohlberg's stages of moral development, he had 6 stages of moral development. These are the first 2 stages that he's talking about. Actually, the first 3 stages will actually take that into account. And then Corey et al. Talk about aspirational ethics, where we understand the interpretive framework behind the code and the principles on which these codes of ethics rest. That takes a much broader understanding of not ethics and morality, but also cognitive development, self-development come into play there, emotional development. All of these things come into play in terms of how we interpret and enact morals and ethics. So I've got this as a little visual for you to see, just putting what we've covered in this presentation into 5 modules, so in a table, so that you can actually just look at it as a glance. In terms of the ethics component, it's the Counsellors and Psychotherapists Association Code and the Psychotherapists and Counsellors Federation of Australia Code. I don't know what codes you would have to draw on that may be part of your thinking in terms of how to apply ethics and work with them. But certainly self-discipline comes into it, and what's this that I can't read without that? Yeah, and really promoting about self-care in the AJC and with the people that you come into contact with, and really looking at ethical intelligence and how to develop that in yourselves and in, it's not, we can't bring that about in others, but in ourselves we can, and in the ways that we are and in the ways we interact with the people who come to us. That in itself can be a developmental assist for people, because we're shedding light on perspectives that they perhaps never have thought of. Yeah. So that's the 4 quadrants. Wilber's 4 quadrants in terms of self-care, and looking at, the we, how that enacts out, and the it's as well, and what we're doing, how we're doing it, how we can gauge it for ourselves. You probably can't see that very well, but can I enlarge that? No. Whoops. I can't actually.
Who is this?
See, that thing did come up, those boxes down the bottom. They're not supposed to come up.
Because you're back in the edit thing. You're not in the slideshow.
Really?
That's what Tim's on to that.
Oh, okay.
So, there's the I.
So there's the I. So why I do what I do, what are my commitments and intentions for self-care. Emotional stuff is like doing our shadow work, our therapy, our supervision, dreaming, journaling, watching and being aware of how our sexuality impacts us and those we relate to. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. On the spiritual level, all the practices that we undertake are on the I, the internal level. So the exterior, how that manifests, is what we actually are doing and what's visible, tangible to others, as well as ourselves. So on the physical level, what we were looking at in terms of the body, vitamins, exercise, relaxation, sleep. On the neurological level, looking at, taking care of our nervous system and the impact on the brain of all of the things that we're doing, and making sure we do look after ourselves, massaging, acupuncture, our drugs and alcohol intake and brain-mind machines. I won't go into all of that, but there are things that you can do now to alter brainwave states. Yep, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. On the exterior collective, what you as the AJC are doing things together. What's your function in the overall system of self-care in the AJC? How do you as a system promote self-care to yourselves, to those you come into contact with, exercising ethical responsibility to each other and to your communities, as well as to the planet, nature, and how you can keep promoting self-care educationally, politically, in the organisations and institutions that you come into contact with. And on the we level, the interior collective, why do you as the AJC do what you're doing around self-care? What are your responsibilities? How to understand that in terms of self-care with respect to others? and utilising each other and your relationships for feedback, so that, you know, we don't, the special snowflake sort of can actually fit in with the other snowflake somewhere. We
Like a
demote
drift.
ourselves. Like a
You
drift.
could make a drift.
You could, absolutely. And the relationship part of self-care is really important, because people, especially those that we care about and who care about us, can be far better guides and judges of what's going on for us than we are at times. Our community, of course, you know, volunteering and doing work, but I think you guys are doing all that already. You don't need to do more of that. And again, how do we sit with and feel about and, you know, work with the ethics and the values and the self-compassion that relate to ourselves and all sentient beings.
Whoops.
Yay!
Probably a bit small.
Terrific. Okay, and I think that's it. The last is just all the references that you can check out for yourselves when you have time, inclination, or what have you.
So we'll make a PDF and make sure everybody gets a copy of that.
Brilliant.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.